Julius Caesar finally subdued the remaining parts of Gaul in his campaigns from 58 to 51 BC. And what was the symbol of the Romans? The eagle. Who were these 10 tribes that the Romans conquered? Now, the Negro knows his history has been destroyed and he's been lied to and the faces of his ancestors have been covered. But ignorantly, the Caucasian seems to think that he's escaped the same fate because he doesn't know the enemy. The enemy has put your kind, Caucasian, in places of power as a front man, but he's not of your kind. So when you fall, he will move on like he did our ancestors in their fallen dark state. But in the golden ages of our ancestors, these beings had to hide. And now we have returned to make them hide once again. So who were the originals from the area of Gaul? They were Semite Hebrews, now called the so-called black man. Let's take it to the Bible to prove the doubters. The book of Acts abruptly ends at Acts 28. Why? Because it describes 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel when they were exiled from North Africa. Both my Bibles have Acts 29 missing. Why? You have to go outside the Bible to find Acts 29. Acts 29 says, "For he heard Phoenicia, that certain of the children of Israel about the time of Assyrian captivity as escaped by sea to the isles afar off, as spoken of by the prophet Esdras, and called by the Romans Britain. And it came to pass, certain of the Druids came unto Paul privately, and showed by their rites and ceremonies they were descended from the Jews, and escaped bondage from the land of Egypt." Acts 29 and 15. "And after these things, Paul and his brethren departed from Ramphinus, or Raphinus, which means Britain, and sailed unto Otium in Gaul." Acts 29 and 18. "After much preaching and toil, Paul and his fellow laborers passed into Helvetia, which is now called Switzerland." If you're not satisfied, let's go to the scholars. They're scholars. This book is called Riddles of Prehistoric Times. Dark men of the Iberian race, like the Bushmen of South Africa, they it was who were the first original inhabitants of North Africa, South and Western Europe, Southern Asia, until they were supplanted by the fairer race, which is the Caucasian. He goes on further to say, the Iberians in ancient times inhabited the western and the southern part of Europe, the northern part of Africa, the Basque, Spain and France, the Black Celts, Ireland, Brittany, and so on. This one is called Ancient Modern Britons. They're describing the ancient Britons. Physically, they were swarthy, which means dark of color, and curly hair. Now let's check the definition of swarthy. Webster 1828. Swarthy, dark hue or dusty complexion. Well, if that doesn't satisfy you that all of Europe was dark at one time, let's ask Benjamin Franklin. He says, "Why should Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements?" Goes further down and says, "Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion." Which leads me to add that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. All of Africa is black or tawny. Asia is chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. And in Europe, Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, Swedes are generally of what they call a swarthy complexion, which is a dark complexion. So in a nutshell, these were Semite Hebrews, or so-called blacks today, who had moved their religious beliefs to Catholic and Protestants. Basically, it was a holy war with the same people, not the Caucasian race. Race and color is a very new concept beginning in the 1900s.